Assignment 3 preview. Question 1. For each of the datasets described below, decide which measure of central tendency would be most appropriate and explain your choice. Consider the scale of measurement for each variable and the likely distribution of the observations. First, before we proceed, there are some big fancy words that we've talked about before. One of them is measure of central tendency. So when we talk about measure of central tendency, we're talking about mean, median, or mode. And then here you have another fancy phrase, scale of measurement. And scale of measurement is namely the 4 types of variables: nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. And then the likely distribution. Distribution can be either normal or skewed. So what we want to figure out is which of the 3 measures of central tendency, mean, median, or mode, would you report for these data listed here. So we want to consider, first of all, what type of variable they are, and if appropriate, what type of distribution it is, and see which measure of central tendency would be the appropriate measure of central tendency to report. So what would be helpful here is to look at the graph in the previous slide to kind of follow along and use that as a guide. So in question A, it says the scores of 500 grade 6 students on a math subtest of an MAT or standardized score. So whenever you have standardized scores, it's going to be numerical, not categorical, right? Or continuous. So it's continuous data, and more specifically is this interval or ratio. Standardized tests are ratio. And standardized tests are also normally distributed, which would be your next question to think about. The distribution is that it's going to be normal. So when we have the data that is continuous, ratio, and normal, where do you end up as far as the measure of central tendency to report? It's going to be the mean. So similarly, then you want to consider these additional variables. And the last question is which average is defined as a value that has 50% of the cases below it. This is not a variable, but it's a question that helps us to understand the concept of the various 3 averages. So see if you can give it some thought. So in question 2 then, it says to report your answer to 2 decimal places. Group A has these scores and Group B also these scores. In questions A and B, it says to report the mean, the median, and the mode of each group, Group A and Group B. And then in question C, it says what is the most appropriate measure of central tendency in each group and why? So first, let's calculate the mean, median, and mode. In both groups, for the mean, you want to add these numbers up and total them, and then divide it by the number of scores. In this case, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 scores. Right? So you want to total them and divide by 8 to get your mean. In order to get the median, you want to line these numbers up in order, starting with number 5, right? Listing it with number 5, 7, and 7 again, and in that sequence, and go right to the middle, right? Because that's how median is defined. And in the case that you can't reach, or the middle is not a particular score, but in between those 2 scores, then you want to take the mean of those 2 scores in the middle. For the mode is the most popular answer, or the most commonly occurring score. So in this case, in Group A, you see that 7 happens twice, but no other numbers occur more than once. So the mode there would be 7. So once we have the mean, median, and mode reported for both groups, then in question C, it says what is the most appropriate measure of central tendency in each group. What you're looking for then is to look at the mean and the median with your results. So if your mean and your median are equal, we would say it's normally distributed. But in the case that they're different, then they're skewed. So again, if the mean and median are the same, right, if they're equal, we would say it's normal. And if they're not the same, then we say it's skewed. We know that it's skewed to the positive side or the negative side, depending on the size, whether the mean is greater or less than the median. So you want to look at your notes in previous slides to figure out whether if there's a difference between the mean and the median, depending on the size, whether it's positive or negatively skewed. In question 3, it's true or false. And if the statement is false, see if you can correct them. So here are statements. Question A, or statement A, the mean is the most frequently occurring average. Okay, is that true or false? And if incorrect or false, make that correction. The second statement says, in a distribution with a positive skew, the median has a higher value than the mean. True or false? And if false, correct the statement. In a normal distribution, the mean, the median, and the mode have the same value. True or false? And lastly, the median has 50% of the cases below it only in a normal distribution. True or false? And if false, make that into a correct statement.